What are the seals that Jesus opened? Here we go. The first seal, the white horse. It's Antichrist who comes to conquer. He's revealed. That's the white horse. That's the first seal. And that's what shows you the Antichrist is revealed after the rapture. The second seal, the red horse. Great warfare breaks out. War like you ain't never seen before is going to break out. These are in the good years of the 7-year tribulation. Why do you think I'm always telling you guys, trust Jesus now? You don't want to be here for the 7 years. So war breaks out. The third seal is the black horse. It's famine. It's a great famine. A day's wages will earn you enough flour to make 1 loaf of bread. Famine all over the world. The fourth seal is the pale horse. Very ugly horse. The result of that seal, the fourth seal, is that 1/4, a quarter of the Earth's population is going to die. And it's going to die by the sword, by famine, by plague, and by the wild beasts of the earth.
Well, can we know when Jesus will return? Well, before we answer that question, we have to ask, well, what do you mean by when Jesus will return? So if in that case you mean the rapture of the church, the coming of Jesus for the church, then I believe the answer is all we can know about the timing of that event is that it is imminent. It has been for almost 2,000 years now, and it will remain imminent, meaning Jesus could come back at any moment up until the rapture of the church occurs. And then, of course, it would no longer be imminent. So we know that about the timing of the rapture. That's all I believe we can know about the timing of the rapture. As well, I take that back. We know that it happens before the tribulation period, I believe, but that's a whole nother discussion. But in this case, we're talking about the second coming of Jesus Christ at the end of the tribulation period, Jesus coming back to set up his kingdom and rule on earth. Can we know when that will occur? Well, some people say, absolutely not. There's nothing we can know about that. And they point to verses like this. So this is from Mark chapter 13, verse 32. This is Jesus speaking. He says, however, no one knows the day or the hour when these things will happen, not even the angels in heaven or the Son himself, only the Father knows. So they would say, we can't know anything about the day or the hour when this will occur, therefore we cannot know. And then they look at verses like this from Matthew 24, verses 43 through 44. Again, this is Jesus speaking. He says, understand this. If a homeowner knew exactly when a burglar was coming, he would keep watch and not permit his house to be broken into. You also must be ready all the time, for the Son of Man will come when least expected. And I think there's a little bit more in that verse than most people see at first glance, which we'll get into in a moment. But here he's saying, keep watch, because I will return when least expected. And then people who say we can't know anything at all would also point to this verse. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 2 says, for you know quite well that the day of the Lord's return will come unexpectedly like a thief in the night. So those who would say we can know nothing about the timing of the second coming of Jesus Christ would point to these verses. And it makes sense when you look at these verses that no, we can't know anything about when Jesus will return. However, we need to do more than simply look at these verses in isolation. So for instance, when we look at this verse, it says, for you know quite well that the day of the Lord's return will come unexpectedly like a thief in the night. Well, you need to look at the rest of that passage. And when we do, we find that we can know something, and we'll get into more of what about the timing of the Lord's return. I believe we can know the general season and the time frame of the Lord's return, and we're going to go through the Bible verses that point out why, starting here. So this is 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verses 2 through 8. So this is the rest of that passage. So he says, this is Paul speaking, he says, For you know quite well that the day of the Lord's return will come unexpectedly, like a thief in the night. When people are saying everything is peaceful and secure, then disaster will fall upon them as suddenly as a pregnant woman's labor pains begin, and there will be no escape. So this will come unexpectedly, very suddenly. But then he says in verse 4, but you aren't in the dark about these things, dear brothers and sisters, and you won't be surprised when the day of the Lord comes like a thief. For you are all children of the light and of the day. We don't belong to darkness and night. So be on your guard, not asleep like the others. Stay alert and be clear-headed. Night is the time when people sleep and drinkers get drunk. But let us who live in the light be clear-headed, protected by the armor of faith and love, and wearing as our helmet the confidence of our salvation. So here, as we read on and look at the context of 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 2, which often is shown in isolation, we see that, yes, we can know. If you're one of the children of the light, one of the brothers and the sisters that Paul is talking about here, the second coming of Jesus Christ will not come upon you unexpectedly like a thief in the night. Why is that? How could that be? He's not alone. Jesus also says that in Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21. He agrees with that. We know because the disciples asked him in each of those passages, they said, well, what are the signs of your coming, the end of the age, your return, your coming to establish your kingdom? And if the answer was, you can know nothing about that timing, he would have rebuked them, or he would have simply said, there's nothing you can know about that, and that would have been the end of it. But instead, he went on to list a number of signs, and he commanded them to watch for those signs, right? So why would he do that if there was nothing that could be known? He would simply say there's nothing that could be known. But instead, he said, here's this list of signs, watch for these signs. And then he said these things right here. Let's look at each of these because he said this in each of those chapters. Matthew 24, verse 33. Jesus says, in the same way, when you see all these things, you can know his return is very near, right at the door. So he's talking about the signs he just discussed, and how when you see those things, when you begin to see those things, you can know that he's right at the door. His return is very near. Now, we can't know the day or the hour. We can't know specifically when that's going to be, but we can know very vaguely. we know that time frame. We know that season based on the appearance of those signs he talked about. We see that again in Mark 13, verse 29. He says, in the same way, when you see all these things taking place, you can know that his return is very near, right at the door. And then again in Luke 21, verse 28, he says, so when you see all these things begin to happen, stand and look up, for your salvation is near. So Jesus is clearly pointing out that we can know this general season, this general time frame of his return based on the signs he said to look for. And when we begin to see those, we know that his return is very near, much like when you see a fig tree, he used as an analogy. When you see it begin to bud, you know that summer is getting near. When you see certain things begin to happen, another example that I believe he used was when you see vultures circling overhead, you know that there is a carcass down below. So when you see these signs, you would know that his return is very near.